Hi there, and welcome back to the Energy Sector Heroes podcast. My name is Michelle Fraser, and every week I will speak with incredible people who share their lessons, experiences, and stories from their time spent in the energy sector. Hi there, and welcome back again to this week's episode. If you're new to the show, then please take a second to subscribe and even consider sharing the show with just one other person. This week I am joined by Rod Matthews. Rod is an incredible CEO of Brevian Energy. Rod, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. You have a great show, and I am more than happy to be a part of it. Again, I am Rod Matthews. We founded Brevian Energy about 4 years ago, and our core focus is bringing renewable energy technologies to communities who really can't afford to deploy them on their own. Either they live in areas where there are a lot of apartment complexes, there's subsidized housing, or quite frankly, they just can't afford to deploy these technologies. So we look to come in, look at projects like that where we can bring these technologies in mass scale to communities to help them get energy that's more affordable, more resilient, and more than anything, much more sustainable by reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, that sounds amazing, actually. So what made you go into that? Because it's quite an incredible initiative that you've taken. It is.
Well, just a little bit of history about me. I started out in the United States Navy. I did 9 years stint there as an electronics technician. Got out of the Navy and started working as a network engineer. And my networking career kind of evolved to, working with data centers and helping them kind of get a handle on their carbon footprint, reduce their energy usage. And in that process, I was introduced to microgrids. And when I kind of learned about them, I was, amazed at the power and the flexibility and the kind of freedom they give you and to get electricity really anywhere. As I became more immersed in that, I saw, the technology, solar being deployed more rapidly, being adopted, particularly here on the West Coast where we are. I'm in California. But I was seeing communities of concern, what I like to call them, or underserved communities. People in those communities didn't have the wherewithal or the resources to deploy these technologies. So just recently here under the Biden administration, there was some legislation that was passed, in particular, the bipartisan infrastructure law and also the Inflation Reduction Act that had a lot of funding to aid in the transition to these new technologies for these communities who, as I mentioned previously, don't have the resources to do them. So that has been really our core focus, is to bring these technologies to those communities because there's nobody really focusing on that right now.
Okay. So what made you focus on that? Because it is quite amazing. I've been to America quite a few times, and it never really seems like there is communities like that.
Yeah, because if you come to America, you come as a tourist, and those aren't communities that you go and take tours of. So you wouldn't see those, which is why we are dedicating resources to that because people don't see them as important. That's why we want to make that our duty to make it important. Because frankly, I come from those communities. I was born and raised in communities like that. So, that is where our focus is going to be. And the great thing about it is we can still be profitable, can still do well as a business by doing good in the community. And I think this is a great time where those two kind of ideas converge, of being profitable and doing good. So we're just excited about the opportunities that await us.
Okay. So you were saying this was a new initiative that your president had taken in.
That is correct.
Yeah. So what initiative was that? Can you tell me more about that?
Well, in 2021, President Biden started introducing legislation that would help to bolster our aging infrastructure here in the United States. And those initiatives were more aimed at, municipalities, cities, local governments to help, bring in renewable energy services, bring in, fix our bridges and increase our, our access to bandwidth, things like that to bolster our infrastructure. And then shortly thereafter, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed into law, which, set aside, about $300 billion to effectively remake our electricity infrastructure. And that was more targeted towards individuals and companies. So with seeing those two initiatives put in place, along with there's several other funding coming from a greenhouse gas reduction fund that is aimed to help reduce greenhouse gases that are emitted. And a lot of that money is targeted towards communities as well. And then there was an initiative called the Justice 40 initiatives, where at least 40% of all of the funding that's made available for these programs is earmarked to go to communities of concern.
Okay, excellent. So what do you think is going to be the most challenging aspect about bringing renewable energy to those?
Unfortunately, here in America, we have a problem of getting actually connected to the grid. There's a queue to wait sometimes 3 to 4 years before your project can even get connected to the grid, which is why what we do is so important, because we have the ability to deliver energy to people, particularly in new situations, that doesn't necessarily require the grid. We can supply your power until the grid becomes available. And when the grid becomes available, it's effectively just a backup or a way you can inject your excess energy into the grid to, build a revenue stream. But as far as your need for power, we can satisfy that need for power by doing a microgrid, or semantically, if you're not connected to the larger grid, you have a mini grid instead of a microgrid. A microgrid is grid connected. So just for semantic purposes.
Okay. So why is it quite hard to get connected to the main grid then?
That's a great question, we've been asking the same thing. Why is it so hard to do so? That's a process that's managed by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. And as a matter of fact, just this past week, they announced some changes that is supposed to speed up that process. We do have, the great thing about some of these community-based programs, they get, per se, head of the line privileges, or they get priority status when it comes to making those connections above just your average commercial project. But, nonetheless, there's still a wait time. And, that is, I think, is one of our biggest challenges. That, and also transmission between grid segments, the regional grid segments. We need, more transmission capabilities.
Okay, so why do you need more transmission authorities?
Well, in a centralized model, which, we mostly have right now, you have a power plant that generates electricity, for, areas that could be 400 mile radius. It's generating power for. And that power has to be, stepped up, and it's more efficient to transmit that power over high speed lines, or it's not high speed, but, high power lines. So they step up the power and voltage, and, they string lines, basically across the country to connect these regions. And that's the problem. We don't have enough transmission, or we don't have enough lanes on the highway in order to allow power to flow effectively in a centralized model, which is why we look at decentralization or local generation by placing these microgrids in areas where the power doesn't have to be transmitted from 300 miles away. It can be generated locally, thereby making it more efficient and not, putting all those electrons on the grid. We can just generate all that stuff locally.
Okay.
So effectively, the problem is with the transmission, you can just equate it to a scenario with the highway. During rush hour traffic, it's pretty tough to move because you don't have enough lanes available. So if we added more lanes available, then we can have electricity moving much more freely between these regions, and thereby reducing the cost, because it's all about supply and demand. When you have a huge demand for the power and not enough of supply, that's when the rates increase dramatically.
Okay. I did understand that, yeah. So, was it hard setting up a business doing this, what you're doing just now?
I mean, it's always, you have the difficulties of any business in general. Setting up any business is difficult. You got to have your business model. You got to understand who your customers are. You have to, develop processes and, efficiencies to be able to provide the services or goods that you are able to produce. And for us, quite the same. For us, we started the business right before COVID, which, wasn't a very opportune time to start a business, but it did give us the opportunity to kind of hone in on our business model and kind of select the correct partners who we were going to be deploying services with. Gave us time to conduct quite a few interviews to make sure that we were delivering services that customers actually wanted. And even with that, here just recently, we've got an opportunity to pivot on what we were doing. Our initial core focus was on commercial and industrial projects, but in our working with these and seeing the state of renewable energy for these underserved communities, we decided to pivot our business and really kind of make that our core focus.
Okay. Did you find it hard setting up a business during COVID?
Yes and no. Yes, from the fact that you couldn't see anybody in person, that made it, somewhat difficult. But no, from the fact that since nobody could see each other in person, everybody developed virtual processes that, made it where I didn't have to run all over everywhere. I can get most of the stuff done on the computer. So it was kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Okay. Have you ever encountered any disasters? What's your biggest problems that you've faced? Because it is quite a unique idea, actually. I've not talked to anybody that has that's delivering the same services that you're doing. So I actually find it really commendable, actually, that you're actually doing this, because it is really a good initiative, actually.
Thank you. Well, for us, I mean, as with anything, starting a business is always difficult. Identifying your first customer to go with you. Also, we are delivering services for people who have been traditionally underserved, right? So there's not a lot of people clamoring to help these individuals. Fortunately, with the latest legislation that has passed, and there have been some, grant opportunities that have been focused on these. That's how we've been trying to, diversify our capital stack to include public and private money to get these projects funded.
Okay, so did you find it quite difficult to find customers?
No, I mean, to finding customers is not the problem, right? There are a lot of communities that can use these services. So finding customers is not the problem. Creating the right situation where these can be successful is really the problem. You have to form, relationships with, different community organizations. You have to form relationships with different, training organizations. What we do is include, training and workforce education into the projects that we do. So when we come into a community, we want to train the people of the community how to deploy and maintain these services. We want to make an impact in these communities. We don't just want to come in and set up something and walk away. We want to be able to make a complete impact on these communities, from lowering their bills to giving them, usable skills after we leave.
Okay, but did you find it hard to get the support from these?
It's very difficult. Yeah, it's not easy. No, not at all. You'll find, number one, we have to go in and convince the people of those communities that we are here to help. That's first and foremost. Because we have to, we're advocating on their behalf. So we identify these these programs, and we can't just show up one day and say, hey, we're here to help. So that means we have to be engaged in these communities. So we have to have people that are at their neighborhood meetings and be able to go in and explain what we're trying to do. Because from what we've seen, people really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So, we have to come in and, let the people know that we're here to help because we care about their situation.
Okay. So do you really have to take a different approach when you're trying to involve these type of communities then?
That is correct. Yeah. Because we have to be seen as a partner to them and not just a company there to exploit them like everybody else.
But that must be really difficult though, because they must have a lot
Yeah.
of barriers up. I would think so.
It's not, again, it's not an easy process, but we consider it a labor of love.
Okay. I think it's incredible actually what you're doing. I thought these organizations that you would be wanting help from, because you did mention you were wanting to partner up with some companies that would help you with training and so forth. I thought that they'd be quite keen to help you. It's quite surprising that you would have to jump through so many hoops to get them on board with you.
I mean, well, with anything, when you're starting something, nobody knows who you are. People are like, who are you guys? So, once we have, a lot more, we've done 100 projects under our belt. We've had news clippings about us and all that, people will be coming to us. But at this point, we're relatively new in the process. So, we just have to take the time to educate people on what we're doing. And they have to be able to see that our intentions and motives are genuine. And we're not just out to exploit people. So we're out to actually help transition these communities into the new revolution of, this is the new internet. This is the new industrial revolution. Our whole grid is going to be remade over the next 10 to 15 years. It's going to happen. And we are dead set on helping these communities transition just like everybody else, because not a lot of people have put a lot of emphasis on that. But with the recent bills that are passed, particularly here in America, on the West Coast, in the Northeast of our country, these renewable technologies, have been adapted, pretty wholeheartedly. But you see in the South and the Southeast, you don't see a lot. In the Midwest, you don't see a lot. So there's been an emphasis to help deploy these technologies in those areas in a quest to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so why do you not see a lot of them in these areas then?
Some of it is regional or cultural attitudes. Some of it, quite frankly, is political. The West Coast and the Northeast of our country have more liberal kind of attitudes towards things, or, you'll see more of the coastal kind of areas more liberal in their thinking, whereas in the South and the Southeast and in our Midwest is more conservative, which here in America, the conservative kind of means you don't really believe in climate change, or it's not an emphasis or not a priority for you. And those kind of attitudes and thoughts are pervasive in those areas, which is why there haven't been an adoption of renewable energy technologies in mass. Plus, particularly in the South, a lot of oil, a lot of the revenues that are coming in are particularly like in Texas and southern parts of Louisiana and Alabama, off those coasts. There are big oil rigs and oil refineries. So a lot of their revenue is generated off of oil. So, renewable energy is a threat to that revenue stream. So as a matter of fact, in the states of Texas, and I think in the state of Florida, they made it a law that if your company has decided to divest in oil and gas investments, then you can't do business in that state.
No, really?
Yeah, really.
That's quite shocking, actually.
I mean, no, it's not shocking.
No, I think
If you're familiar with American politics, it's not shocking at all.
I think that's really shocking. And
Yeah, if you're familiar with American politics, it's not.
wow.
It may be shocking if you're not from America, but if you're from America and familiar with American politics, it's not shocking at all.
I'm speechless. And that's maybe not so much. Wow. I can't even
So,
believe that.
so those are the attitudes that we're dealing with when we are talking about deploying renewable energy technologies in, in those areas that we talked about.
Okay. I'm still speechless. How would companies even get around that situation?
Well, you're seeing, well, I know particularly in the western areas of Texas, they've deployed a lot of wind turbines because, it's pretty windy out in those areas of West Texas.
Mm.
But we've been seeing flaws in that, just recently here. This has been the hottest year on record worldwide. I don't know what your weather conditions are like where you are, but I know here in America, pretty much all over the country, except for thankfully here in Southern California, the temperatures have been at record levels. So I forgot where I was going. We can skip that. What was the question again?
I was still thinking about what you were saying before, actually. I can't even believe that. That is ridiculous.
Yeah. Governor Abbott in Texas and Governor DeSantis of Florida have both made those proclamations.
I can't even believe that.
Yeah. Again, if you are familiar with American politics, that would not be surprising to you at all, particularly from those two people.
Okay. But would that even mean that it would be hard for America to even embrace renewable energy then, if they
I
have?
mean, because there are two diametrically opposed views when it comes to these technologies here in America. And again, it mostly falls down political lines, right? Democrat, Republican. Most of the Republican Party, for the most part, are climate change deniers for the most part. Not everyone, but as far as the policies they've adopted, they wanted to get us out of the Paris Accord. They don't believe in cafe standards, and they believe in drill, baby, drill for oil. It's all about oil and gas, oil, oil, oil.
I heard that actually. I
Yeah.
have heard that. But do you think that that means that America maybe, because everybody's gone on about how they've got to have their net zero by 2035 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really going to make that maybe pretty non-existent then, or really hard for
Now, it's
America.
different states have different mandates, right? So not everybody has that mandate.
Okay.
I guarantee you, Texas doesn't have that mandate. Wyoming doesn't have that mandate. North Dakota doesn't have that mandate
Okay.
because their economies are based in large part due to oil and gas. So no, they're not going to have those mandates. California, however, there's that mandate, and even in the individual cities here in California, we have a movement that most of the municipalities are moving to what's called CCAs, or community choice aggregators. It's when these municipalities come together and form joint partnerships to, in essence, become the utility company. So they buy power wholesale on the wholesale market, and they get it distributed by the local investor-owned utility, and they serve on behalf of the people through these CCAs. Supposedly it saves money, but primarily it is to ensure the amount of renewable technologies that they have in their portfolio by those certain dates that we talked about.
Okay. I'm still thinking about what you told me before. I still can't believe that. I think that's probably the most shocking thing that anybody's told me, actually. I can't even believe that. I'm going to ask you
Yeah.
something else. I can't even, oh my goodness. You were saying before you were going to offer these communities training. What kind of training are you going to be offering them?
I mean, there's, the construction trades, because, you have to put down the panels from a construction standpoint, driving spikes in the ground, putting up posts, pouring concrete, that kind of stuff. So there's a construction aspect. And then there's the electrical trades to understand how to connect the panels and connect them to inverters and, the control systems and program the batteries and all of that. So there is that training, understanding basic electricity, being electricians, and also construction training.
Okay, so are you gonna be offering them jobs to actually help them build the renewable energy then?
That is correct. What we do, we work in conjunction with, we develop these projects, and, we work with some of the local unions like the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, who have these workforce partnership programs that can help us build them out using the local talent that's in the area.
Okay, and do you think you're going to get a lot of people? I'm pretty sure you will get a lot of people that's going to be willing to take you up on that offer for the training, so they could, because it's creating jobs in a community that there might be.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's like we look to partner with local community colleges. Again, most of this stuff is all about partnerships, identifying, the right stakeholders to partner with in these projects, and, going in with the plan to execute.
Okay.
It's very important that we get, buy-in from the community. So we have, in most cases in these communities, there's some sort of neighborhood improvement type organization that we can work with to come in and set up these programs. So, and they know the stakeholders in that community. So we really go, pitch our program to them. We form those alliances. We bring those, to the respective cities, and, we make those relationships go from there.
Okay, so is it quite hard to make a pitch to these type of organizations then, to the
I
stakeholders?
know. Well, in most part, there's no one else really doing that for them. So the fact that we are identifying areas to reach out to help them, they're all for it in most cases.
Okay.
And they already have the relationship with the people of the community. So, we get with them, and they kind of get with the people of the community. We set up, an event to, kind of come out and make them aware of what we're trying to do to get buy-in from the entire community. And really that's the key to make all of this work. So it can't just be us. We can't just go in and say, this is what we want. We have to go in and help these communities say what they want.
Okay. So this can really change these communities' lives then, the way
That's
that.
that's the whole goal.
But that is quite amazing, though. That is quite amazing. How do you describe your typical working week? That's what I'm going to ask you.
Okay. So for us, we are always, working with our guys who are out in the field, who are making these relationships. We're checking on them. Training is a big part of what we do. So we do a lot of training during the week. We look at what existing projects are there. We're following up on those. We have a project management team who is responsible for, staying abreast on, permit procedures and the process, and, the logistics of, a project, when are parts due, and when are people scheduled. So, just typical kind of stuff. Here recently, we spent a lot of time, some of our guys spent a lot of time going to these different conferences, across the country. That's one of the things, that there's a lot of travel involved, a lot of different conferences, trade shows, and the like, to really be on the circuit, per se, in air quotes, because, most of the people in this industry, that's how they meet each other, or through those kind of events, these industry type events.
Okay. When you hire people, what kind of skills are you going to be looking for?
First and foremost, whoever comes to work with Brevian Energy has to share in our passion and commitment for bringing these technologies to the communities that we're bringing them to. Because we are first and foremost a purpose-driven business, right? So without that purpose, that's what gets us through those difficult times that you talked about. You ask, how do we get through difficult times? And it's that commitment to purpose. We're not just out here trying to make a buck. We're out here trying to change lives. So I need to understand, if you're coming to be a part of our organization, that you have that same commitment. We can teach you all kind of skills, or our processes, how we do things. You can always get trained on how to be a better electrician, or how to be a better project manager, but nobody can train you to care. You have to have that inside. So that's really important for us, is we want people who care, who see this as not just a job, but a mission and a journey.
Okay, so going back to the training. So if you were going to hire somebody, you would put them through some sort of training scheme, and then what would happen after that then?
I mean, training, we don't look at it as a one-time thing. We train you to do your job and that's it. I mean, training is an ongoing process, hard skills and soft skills. I mean, so we have training on, you know, how to perform self-care. We have training on how to deal with, your coworkers. We have, not just training on your job per se, but, we believe in a culture of learning. So we're always looking to improve at every level.
Okay. So, is there anything that you still want to achieve doing this? Have you still got a lot
Oh, our goal is to, right now we are focusing on projects in the state of California, but we want to replicate these programs to go nationwide. As we mentioned, there's a big need in our southern and southeast states. And from there, we want to scale our services to include, emerging markets in Africa and Central America, because those are community. We want to help all communities everywhere, not just here in America. So we see the need for these services in a lot of these different emerging markets as well.
Okay. Do you want anything that I should highlight actually?
I know right now we have our eyes set on a project here locally in San Diego that is a closed landfill, but sits in one of those lower to medium income communities that we talked about. So we're looking to work with the city to get a lease for that property. It's about 80 acres or so. Right now, they are piping out the methane that's being produced from the decaying waste and pipe it across the street to another facility and burn it off. We want to be able to capture that methane and deploy hydrogen fuel cells and have them provide the energy for those to provide that base load power, and also include solar panels and some battery storage to be able to help the citizens of that community, of the surrounding community, save on their energy costs. So not only will we help to take out that methane that's being just burned off and released into the atmosphere in that community, but we can utilize it to actually subsidize the electricity costs for people in that neighborhood. And here in San Diego, we have the highest electricity rates in all of America.
Do you? How is
We
that?
do. How is it? It's because of a company called San Diego Gas and Electric. Yeah. So we have the highest utility rates. And for us, our utility is priced on a tiered basis. So we have 3 different tiers. We have what's called super off peak, is like between 9 p.m. and 6:59 a.m. Then we have off peak, which is 7 a.m. to 3:59 p.m. And then we have peak time, which is 9 a.m. which is 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. During that time, which is the time when most people are home and cooking and washing clothes and doing whatever they do, the price is as high as 55 cents per kilowatt.
That's extraordinary. I think they want to try and do that. They want to try and do that in the UK, but they haven't been successful actually.
So yeah, it's been very expensive.
It is expensive.
So what we can do is avoid those costs by deploying battery systems that in the evening, when the solar stops producing, you can switch your load to the battery instead of pulling from the grid at those expensive rates.
Okay.
And that's how we can, effectively reduce, particularly here in California. It's, a no-brainer in San Diego that we can reduce your costs right off top.
Okay, so
by at least a third.
By a third. That's quite a lot.
It is quite a lot.
That would be quite a lot for a lot of people, actually.
Absolutely.
So, if you could turn back time, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
I would say I would probably have gotten started earlier in this business. But although I think we did pick the right time, I wouldn't have started during COVID. I would have, kind of warned myself, hey, man, COVID is coming up. If I could turn back time. But I think we're actually in this business at the exact right time. This is a great time to be here. Prior to the past couple of years, it was kind of a risky proposition. But with all of the government funding that has been made available and the overall attitude between, of people has really been changing over the few past years, where these technologies are much more accepted now than they were even, say, 5 years ago. I think it's a great time to be in this industry. It's growing. And the great part about what we do is everybody needs what we produce.
They most certainly do. And what you're doing is amazing, actually, considering the amount of restrictions that you have against you. So that's all the questions I have today. I would like to thank Rod for your time. That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening, and see you next week. That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, I'd like to gently encourage you to leave a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts, and share the show with another person. You can also follow me on LinkedIn or via my website, www.michellefraserconsultancy.com. Thanks again for listening, and see you next week.